What if the most dangerous moment in a war is not the first strike, but the moment a leader starts looking for a way out? In this story, the battlefield is not only in Iran, in the Strait of Hormuz, or inside missile tunnels buried underground. It is inside the language of power itself. Because when a president keeps promising the war is almost over, while the evidence on the ground suggests the opposite, the real question is no longer just what is happening in the Middle East. The real question is whether America is watching strategy unfold or panic. And if the people in charge are trying to control the narrative faster than they can control the conflict, then what's next may be even more dangerous than what has already happened.
The president told Fox Business today in an interview that he believes the war is close to being over. Does it seem like it is close to being over in your view?
Well, not in a way that's satisfactory to the United States. I do think Trump has wanted out of this for quite some time. It's palpable in the way he discusses it. He just can't figure out how to do it in a way that he can declare victory with a straight face. I don't think in the near term you can declare victory until we have militarily cleared the Strait of Hormuz such that Gulf Arab oil can get out. I think it's the right thing to do to blockade ships going to and from Iran. But I think what's critical to demonstrate that Iran is not the hegemon in the Gulf is that we have to make it safe for the other oil producers to get their oil out, which will have a material impact, I think, on the global economy. And while shutting Iran's exports down, certainly have a material effect on their economy, too.
Well, I mean, you are arguing you think this ceasefire is a mistake, that Iran could regroup during this. There are new satellite images today. They were reviewed by CNN that appear to show Iran digging at the entrance of missile bases where their missile launchers are trapped because of the strikes from the United States and Israel. Do you think this is something that they could potentially access during this ceasefire period, or what's your sense of these images?
Well, I think that's what they're certainly trying to do. I mean, we've got intelligence reports that indicate that the administration's claims of success, particularly against missile launchers, may have been overly optimistic. The silver lining here is let them dig them out. Let them bring them out. I assume we're going to be watching all these very carefully. As they bring them out, we destroy them. Then we can close the tunnels again. This is a question that requires resolve on the part of the president. Now, whether he thought about that in advance or not is highly unclear. But it's a mistake at this point to look for an easy way out. I think the government of Iran has been badly damaged. I don't buy the argument that the regime is still intact, still functioning. I think it's clearly been set back. President Pezeshkian was quoted in the press today saying it would take 12 years to get Iran's economy back to the point where it was on February the 28th. And where it was on February the 28th was in the cellar. So we've had enormous impact, and this is not the time to pull back.
Can I ask you, just as someone who worked closely with President Trump when he was in the Oval the last time, you were in the Situation Room with him. I mean, as we've been watching, he's lashing out at the Pope after he said, and was critical of the war in Iran, and said that there should be peace in Iran. He lashed out last week saying a whole civilization will die tonight in Iran before calling off his threat and implementing the ceasefire. Last night we had Marjorie Taylor Greene on, and she was saying that she worries about the president's mental stability because of things like that. As someone who worked with him, what is your view on that?
Well, I'm not a shrink, so I don't know what purpose it serves by saying he's a narcissistic sociopath. I mean, that's not the issue. The issue is he doesn't know what he's doing. And I think a lot of the behavior shows the panic that he's in, that he can't see a way out of this. For whatever reason, he thought it would be easier than it was. I can't believe he wasn't told that by the Pentagon and others, told that they would try and close the Strait of Hormuz, told that they would go after the Gulf Arab countries. He apparently either didn't listen or didn't believe it, and now he doesn't know what to do. So I think a lot of this is panic more than anything else.
Well, I mean, I think people might hear that and say, you say he doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, he is the sole decision maker pretty much when it comes to what happens next in this war in terms of the United States' moves here. I mean, everyone is kind of waiting and listening to him, whether it's, can they have 20 years of enrichment? Before they can enrich, can they do this? Can they do that? I mean, for you to say that he doesn't know what he's doing, I think is probably pretty alarming to some people.
Well, I don't see that as much different from the first term. He does not think in strategic terms, contrary to what his supporters say. He does not play three-dimensional chess. He sees international affairs through the prism of his personal relationships. So when he thinks the Pope is attacking him, his immediate reaction is attack the Pope. None of this is part of a bigger picture. These communications are not part of an overall communication strategy. And in fact, what he did at the beginning of the administration was eliminate a good part of our ability to communicate our point of view into Iran, which would be very helpful to be doing right now.
Can I just ask, what would you have said to the president if he was attacking the Pope over what he said about Iran, if you were the national security advisor still?
Stop.
On that note, Ambassador John Bolton, thank you for joining us.
Very close to over. That is how President Trump is describing the war with Iran in a new interview this morning. Of course, it's also how he described it 4 weeks ago. This is the new assertion.
Is this war over?
I think it's close to over, yeah. I mean, I view it as very close to over. You know what? If I pulled up stakes right now, it would take them 20 years to rebuild that country. And we're not finished. We'll see what happens. I think they want to make a deal very badly.
So that was the new statement. This is how he has been saying it repeatedly, starting more than a month ago.
Are you thinking this week it will be over?
No,
Are you talking
but soon.
about days?
I think soon.
Okay, and with respect
Very soon. Look, everything they have is gone, including their leadership. We've already won in many ways, but we haven't won enough. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over. Well, I think we're going to end it. I can't tell you for sure. You know, I don't like to say this. We've won this. This war has been won.
So if there is something different this time, it could be hope over a new round of talks with Iran, possible new round of talks. If it does come together, Vice President J.D. Vance is expected to lead the U.S. team again. Also new this morning, new satellite images appear to show Iran digging for missiles trapped underground and missile launchers after the U.S. and Israeli strikes. Let's get right to CNN's Elena Trine at the White House this morning for the latest on what you are hearing. Good morning, Elena.
Good morning, John. Yeah, look, I mean, we did hear the president give a number of comments during that interview with Fox News, much of it not really new, including this idea that the war is very close to over. That's certainly, though, the hope that this White House has. And I will say from the conversations I've been having with Trump officials is that they do hope they can get a second round of talks off the ground. And they hope that that could happen before this 2-week ceasefire expires next week on April 21st. Of course, that's a big ask, and I'm told that all of the discussions over this potential second sit-down face-to-face with Iranian officials is still preliminary, but that is what they are working toward and hoping that could, if not, result in a final agreement, at least offer enough progress to extend the ceasefire and try to really find this diplomatic solution that many, many Trump officials really want at this point in time. But look, some of the things that the president did say in this interview with Maria Bartiromo, one was he talked about this blockade. He was arguing that it's been successful, of course, the naval blockade on the Strait of Hormuz, and said that he does believe that it's forcing the Iranians back to the table, kind of the intended effect that the Trump administration had when imposing that military blockade. But he also talked about the economy. And the thing that I found really interesting is we did hear him earlier this week, arguing that, gas prices are bad and the economy might be bad for some time. He did try to walk some of that back, though, in this interview. I want you to listen to what he said.
Well, look, there's a hit because, we go through it for whatever it is, 6 weeks. There's going to be a hit, but it's going to recover, I think, fully. Somehow they misquoted me. I think oil will be down to the levels it was. They said, I expect oil to be high at the midterms. I don't expect that.
So there you have it, him trying to argue that he thinks oil prices and the economy will be in better shape by the time the midterms come. Notably, the comments that he made come, they were published at least today, a day after he met with the House Speaker Mike Johnson and people at the NRCC here at the White House. Obviously, midterms have a lot of Republicans, especially, kind of on edge with what we are seeing happening in the economy and with high oil prices. But the president trying to reassure a lot of Americans today with those remarks, John.
All right, Elena Treen for us at the White House. The president really walking back statements that, by all accounts, he absolutely did make, now saying something diametrically opposed on the economy. Thank you.
In the end, this is not simply a conversation about Iran. It is a conversation about power under pressure, about what happens when a leader wants the appearance of victory more than the discipline required to achieve it. Throughout this video, the central tension never really leaves the screen. Donald Trump keeps signaling that the war is close to over, while John Bolton argues that the underlying reality is far more unstable, far more unfinished, and far more dangerous than the public is being led to believe. And that contrast is what gives this story its documentary weight. It is not only about bombs, blockades, or diplomacy. It is about the gap between political messaging and strategic reality. From the very beginning, the story is framed around a simple but devastating question. Is this war actually ending, or is someone trying to declare the ending before the facts allow it? Bolton's answer is blunt. He suggests Trump has wanted out for some time, but cannot find an exit that still looks like triumph. That is where the story becomes bigger than one administration or one conflict. Because history has shown again and again that wars do not become less dangerous, simply because leaders become tired of them. In fact, some of the most volatile moments come when a government tries to escape a conflict without fully controlling its consequences. When that happens, military reality begins colliding with political theater, and the cost of that collision can be enormous. The video then pulls us into the geography of the crisis. The Strait of Hormuz, one of the most important choke points in the world. This is not just water on a map. It is an artery of the global economy. Whoever threatens it is not merely challenging a rival state. They are shaking energy markets, trade expectations, and the daily financial stability of millions of people who may know nothing about the Gulf, but will still feel the consequences in fuel prices, inflation, and economic uncertainty. Bolton argues that a blockade on Iran alone is not enough. If the United States wants to prove Iran does not control the Gulf, then it must also secure the passage of oil from other producers. That distinction matters, because in strategic terms, dominance is not just the ability to stop an enemy. It is the ability to protect the system around you. Then comes one of the most revealing themes in the entire segment, the ceasefire. On the surface, ceasefires sound like relief. They sound like pause, de-escalation, hope. But Bolton reframes it as an opportunity, not for peace, but for regrouping. Satellite images appear to show Iran digging around the entrances of missile bases, trying to recover trapped launchers after U.S. and Israeli strikes. In narrative terms, this changes the mood of the story. Suddenly, the ceasefire no longer looks like an ending. It looks like an intermission, a brief stillness in which both sides are measuring damage, repositioning assets, and preparing for what may come next. And that is exactly the kind of tension that holds an audience. The sense that what appears calm may actually be preparation. But perhaps the sharpest turn in the video comes when the focus shifts from military movement to presidential behavior. Bolton avoids making himself a psychologist, yet his political diagnosis is harsher than any clinical label. He says the issue is not what Trump is called, but that he does not know what he is doing. He argues that Trump does not think strategically, does not operate from a coherent long-term plan, and instead reacts personally, emotionally, and immediately. That observation transforms the story from a foreign policy debate into a leadership study. Because once a war is being shaped by impulse rather than structure, by personal grievance rather than strategic architecture, every statement becomes more consequential. Every outburst becomes a signal. Every promise of imminent victory becomes a test of credibility. This is where the video becomes deeply unsettling. It suggests that the world may be watching not a carefully calibrated campaign, but a leader improvising under stress while still trying to dominate the public storyline. CNN reinforces this by rolling the tape, clip after clip of Trump saying the war will end soon, saying it has already been won in many ways, saying the country has been devastated and cannot recover quickly. These repeated claims are not presented as confidence alone. They are presented as a pattern, and patterns matter. Because when leaders repeat the language of imminent resolution over and over again, even while military and diplomatic conditions remain unresolved, the repetition itself begins to feel like evidence of urgency, even desperation. It starts to sound less like strategy and more like persuasion, directed not at the enemy, but at the public, the markets, and perhaps even at political allies who are growing nervous. The final section broadens the lens even more by bringing in the economy. Oil prices, midterm anxieties. The fear of economic pain stretches across weeks. This matters because every foreign conflict eventually comes home in one form or another. Sometimes through casualties, sometimes through instability, sometimes through inflation. The White House, according to the report, hopes talks can resume and perhaps create enough progress to extend the ceasefire. That hope may be real. But the video makes clear that hope is not the same thing as resolution. And for viewers, that is the final emotional hook. The realization that behind every confident public statement, there may be a frantic effort to buy time, shape perception, and avoid the full cost of unfinished decisions. So what is this story really about? It is about the struggle between narrative and reality, between the desire to declare peace and the evidence that conflict still has unfinished business, between public confidence and private uncertainty, between a leader who wants control of the ending and a situation that may no longer be fully controllable. And that is why this video works so well as a high engagement political documentary piece. It is not just asking whether the war is ending, it is asking who gets to define what ending even means. And maybe that is the most important question of all. Because if wars can be rhetorically ended before they are strategically resolved, then the public is no longer just watching history unfold. It is watching history being narrated in real time by people desperate to own the final frame. So watch closely. Listen to what is being promised. Compare it to what is still moving underground, still shifting at sea, still waiting inside the ceasefire. Because sometimes the most revealing part of a conflict is not the strike, not the speech, not even the negotiations. It is the moment leaders start insisting the end is near, while the world around them still looks anything but finished.